I move amendments 1 to 11 as circulated in my name together. The amendments that I have moved today go to inducements. It actually goes to recommendation 16 of the Murphy Review, which, and I quote, "The committee recommends that the Australian government prohibit all online gambling inducements and inducement advertising, and that it do so without delay." I can't say that the government's followed this recommendation. The delay has been exhaustive. It was over 1,000 days for the government to even respond to the Murphy Review, but it turns out once the government has decided to act, we can't even have a full debate on the gambling advertising legislation and changes they're putting forward, because that apparently has to pass through without delay. And I do want to note this, this is a bad way of managing legislation, bad way of managing complex legislation that matters to the Australian people, and this is a deal between both the major parties who have agreed to these amendments, which they have given to people without really any notice at all. It's just a bad way to run this parliament, and shows a deep lack of respect to the people who sent us to this place to address these issues. Now, I want to talk about why inducements are important. The government has said, look, we are trying to address gambling harm. Well, look, if you're trying to address gambling harm, there is no better place than to ban inducements. And I want to quote some research by Professor Samantha Thomas, some words that some young people have described inducements. "It did encourage me to place more bets than I usually would, because it felt like I wasn't using my own money. When I didn't bet for a while, I was sent bonus bet texts. This influenced me as it prompted me to go back. Inducement appeals to young adults because they make gambling feel easier, cheaper or more exciting. Promotions encourage people to bet more than they normally would." And that's exactly what they do. Inducements create urgency, reduce the perception of risk, and make people feel like they're not gambling with their own money. This is what creates the problem gamblers that we have in this country. This is what creates the harm that we have in this country driven by gambling. Now, I recognise the government has put forward a number of amendments in relation to inducements. And, I support those amendments for what they are. But honestly, this is not what the Murphy Review requested, and I am sceptical about the impact that these minor amendments that the government and opposition have agreed to, whether they would genuinely make the difference that they're intended to. So there's a cooling-off period for 14 days. There's a ban for those people who've been red flagged by the government's metrics, so we're not quite sure how that's going to work. And then there's some bans for people who have put themselves forward with BetStop. This is a situation where we are literally providing the pathway for people to become problem gamblers, to people's lives to be ruined by gambling, and then say, oh, by the time that you get there, we'll see if we can do anything to make this a little bit easier for you. The government has an option. The opposition has an option. It could just go out there and ban inducements altogether. It has failed to do this, and this is deeply disappointing. And it is deeply disappointing to all the people who came and gave their time and effort to all the inquiries that we have had about gambling, because we could be making Australians safer right now, and we have chosen not to, and that is a decision that has been made by the major parties.
The Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank the member for Wentworth for moving this amendment. The government will not be supporting this amendment. The amendments we are making to the Gambling Reform Bill relate to the direct marketing of inducements, align with the government's overarching policy intent, that is to balance the protection of children and vulnerable Australians without limiting legitimate consumer choices. I would also note that some bans on inducements mentioned in the members' amendments, such as banning inducements relating to opening and closing an account, are already legislated by states and territories under the National Consumer Protection Framework. I thank the House.